The time travel scene in Star Trek IV eats away at my sanity a little bit more every day. The moment when they actually slingshot around the sun and go back in time, a blinding light followed by a gray abyss with the floating heads of the cast bobbing up and down like buoys. If you've lived your whole life and never seen a textureless CGI interpretation of Scotty's head transform into Uhura's head, here you go. Your life will continue, but that image will be somewhere in your brain at all times. Then there's this thing that's kind of like the worst possible AI image of a whale. And then a mannequin falls out of blue fire into water. And then I don't know. This is in the movie. This is art. I mean, how else would you communicate the idea of time travel to an audience? Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home is a crazy movie made by crazy people. It is widely beloved, but by all metrics of Star Trek fandom, it shouldn't be. In every other instance, broadly speaking, this is a fan base that is very concerned with logical consistency. And yet, nothing about this movie makes any sense. It plays like a parody of Star Trek. A goofy comedy that shows the infinitely competent crew of the Enterprise as a bunch of clueless space aliens who don't know how to act like humans. I want to be very clear, I love this movie. My take is that the nonsense isn't really important because it's a good comedy movie. It's the same reason I don't demand a ton of logical consistency out of Short Circuit. It's clearly not that kind of movie. I love it, but I find it very surprising that the fandom loves it too. What's going on with this movie? And has there been any success recreating this magic in the decades since? You remember the one with the whales? A mysterious probe is beaming a signal at the Earth that is vaporizing the oceans and generally ending the world. It takes the Enterprise crew about 2 minutes to discover that the only possible solution to this problem is to go back in time and bring back humpback whales to the future to talk to the probe. It just makes sense. So they get in their stolen Klingon bird of prey because the Enterprise isn't in this movie and slingshot around the sun to head back to the 1980s. Believe it or not, things have not gone off the rails yet. This is still just a reasonable sequel to Star Trek III. It's when they actually get to 1986 Earth that this movie goes wild. The plan is to steal some whales and go home, so step one is to land your spaceship in the middle of a public park while people are currently there. Obviously. At this point, everybody on the crew forgets how to act like a human. They're coneheads now. Except Sulu. Sulu just makes friends with a guy and gets a helicopter out of it. From there, it's just madness. Here's some highlights. Kirk sells his glasses from Wrath of Khan and justifies it this way.
Weren't those a birthday present from Dr. McCoy?
And there will be again, that's the beauty of it.
Which couldn't possibly make any sense. Chekhov and Uhura find a naval shipyard by shouting nuclear vessels at strangers in the street over and over again. And in my favorite moment, Scotty is about to give future technology to a 20th century businessman when McCoy stops him because this is going to change the timeline.
You realize, of course, if we give him the formula, we're altering the future.
To which Scotty replies, but what if it doesn't?
What? How do we know he didn't invent the thing?
And that's good enough. That's a reasonable answer. Star Trek IV stands as the shining example of why plot holes don't ruin a movie. The creators of The Voyage Home embraced chaos, and we're all the better for it. There's few things more satisfying than watching Kirk and Spock execute the most poorly conceived plan imaginable and having it somehow work. This movie was a big deal when it released. It was a kind of success Star Trek hadn't seen before. It was the first time this franchise cracked $100 million at the box office. There is still a stage at Paramount Studios with 2 humpback whales painted on it because this was one of their mega hits. And this was a Star Trek movie with no Enterprise, no space, and not even in the future. So the question is, if this wild outlier was such a smash hit, have they ever tried to replicate it? The answer is yes, but not as many times as you might expect. But what does it really mean to replicate Voyage Home? There are tons of Star Trek episodes about going back in time. Are they all Voyage Homes? Voyages home? No. It must be traveling back to modern-day Earth to fix the future It must be the entire crew, and there must be wacky hijinks. This rules out honorable mentions like Enterprise's Carpenter Street and Strange New Worlds Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which both only bring 2 characters back in time, and with only a small amount of hijinks. To my knowledge, there are 2 times they really went all in on revisiting that Star Trek IV magic. The first is the Voyager episode Future's End, which released almost exactly 11 years after the Voyage Home. This is the 2-parter where a dude from the 29th century tries to destroy Voyager in his time ship and gets everybody thrown back to the 90s. Now Janeway and friends have to stop the future from being destroyed by an evil tech billionaire, also known as a tech billionaire. It turns out the computer revolution of the 80s and 90s was reverse engineered from this crashed time ship, and now he's going to pilot it to the 29th century to steal more technology. But since he's a tech billionaire, he's an idiot that doesn't know what he's doing and will in fact destroy everything. It turns out that if we let those guys do whatever they want, they will destroy everything. One essential element of any good Voyage Home scenario is teaming up with the plucky modern woman. In Star Trek IV, it was Dr. Jillian, the whale biologist. And in Future's End, it's Sarah Silverman? Okay. She teams up with what turns out to be Voyager's greatest duo, Tuvok and Tom Paris. Oh, you better believe there are hijinks. This is also when the Doctor gets his mobile emitter, because Ed Begley Jr. has tech from the 29th century, but in the 20th century? It's a lot. Oh, and some racist anti-government guys kidnap Chakotay and B'Elanna Torres, and Tuvok just shows up and takes them out with absolutely no difficulty. I'm not really sure why that happens in the show, but what am I going to do? Be upset about it? The only real shame with this one is that Harry, Cass, and Neelix stay on the ship the entire time. Overall, Future's End is wacky and fun, but it doesn't quite devolve into total madness like Star Trek IV. The latest and most ambitious example of Trek going all in on a voyage home is Season 2 of Star Trek Picard. The whole season. And it is incredible. This one is pretty recent, so I won't get into any major spoilers, but the gist of it this time is that Q changes the past and it replaces the Federation with what is essentially the Mirror Universe. So it's up to Picard and the wildly underrated La Sirena crew to travel back to 2024 and fix the future. They do the same slingshot around the sun thing. We don't get the giant floating heads, though. Do I want to see Eleanor's head morph into Seven of Nine's head? I don't. I do, though. I really do. Now, standard outer space Star Trek covers a lot of real-world issues through a sci-fi lens, but when it comes to actually portraying the modern day, it usually just shows a guy with a mohawk and says, "What a world, am I right?" Picard Season 2 doesn't play around, though, really digging into issues of immigration and deportation. Literally, there's a plot line about ICE disappearing people, and I'm really glad they went for it. The whole season is a big, elaborate story that comes together beautifully at the end. There's Borg stuff, there's a Dr. Soong involved, Guinan is there, there's a musical number. It really is firing on all cylinders. Setting a whole season on modern-day Earth was a bit much for some people, but I was absolutely enthralled by the whole thing. I've made it no secret that I have greatly enjoyed this new era of Star Trek. But I think this season of Picard is my favorite full season arc of modern Trek. Even more so than the Next Generation reunion in Season 3. Oh, and yes, the plucky modern woman is here. This time she runs a health clinic. Okay, so those are the big ones, but do they recapture the magic of Star Trek IV? Yes and no. Certainly on a cultural level, none of them come close to actual Star Trek IV. That said, they're all very fun to watch. There's something that delights me about the idea of writing modern day as a period piece. They all bring their own charm to the table, and it's cool to see each new era of Star Trek have their own take on the concept. Voyager and Picard were made in a post-Next Gen time when going full tilt off the rails like that original movie is much riskier than it was back then. So none of them go quite as far as throwing out all semblance of coherent plot and turning it all into a big goof. Modern Trek even has a comedy series, but even Lower Decks never achieved the level of pure wacky nonsense that Star Trek IV seemed to deliver so effortlessly. I'm not sure a Star Trek IV would even fly in the world of modern internet fandom. Unless we all get really into saving the whales again. No, not that whale.